see you here, all of you. And now that I have your names and email addresses, then it means that you'll be on my mailing list.
I would like to thank my very old friend Irene for moderating this event. It was necessary because it came out of coffee meet. I was also insured by resolution. I would like to extend gratitude towards Dr. Joan Bui from Empisha Hospital for supporting us. Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Health Group, Mr. Luquaro here. Nice to have you. Also, with you guys, we have crawled, we have struggled, and we have came a long distance, more than a decade, with these partners that we had, wonderful people. And I'd like also to welcome Mr. Ashusha. Sir, nice to have you here, nice to meet you. The group CEO of AP Insurance, and Mr. Kambeowino. 10 years ago we started with Gertrude's, thanks to Mr. Gordon who brought us here, and we grew with him. He's my mentor, and I learned a lot from him during those days. We are a hospital information system provider. Basically, it was our focus, but now we have grown onto something more dynamic, more organic. We have become more service oriented, so that's where we realized, and the realization came through our partnership with Meridian in 2016 when we went live with the cloud version of the HIS, and today we have Meridian all the clinics, 3 hospitals that is running there, and it gave us a lot of learning on the way. We also have Chirumalen Medical Center, which is a psychiatric hospital completely running on that platform, and we are also growing and we are doing a lot of interesting stuff. That's why we now have a new face we call Tranzact. So Tranzact Cloud Services is everything about connecting 2 entities, may they be a payer, a provider, or insurance companies, or or M-Pesa, or banks, whoever. It is a platform that will allow you to connect to each other. So look out for Tranzact. We are going to come in a bang. I cannot say bang. It's okay. In an amicable manner, and you will find us everywhere, wherever you are needed. If you're a doctor, we can serve you. If you're a clinic owner, small or big, doesn't matter, we can serve you. If you're a hospital, small or big, doesn't matter, we can still serve you. If you are an insurance company, we are here for you. If you are a bank, we are here for you. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will hand it over to Irene. Thank you everyone for coming here.
The first question, of course, I ask is what is happening with them, just to have an idea. What level of care do they require? The second question I ask, once I have figured out whether they can get it in a level 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 hospital, is how are they going to pay? Because that determines then where I will direct them. So if they say they have insurance, the next question I'll ask, which insurance? So when they tell me NHIF, I'll ask civil servant. And because of the entitlements that the different people have. And the reason for all this questioning is because you want a patient to go to a place where they won't have to be tossed back and forth. By the time they are calling and asking this question, they're desperate and they're hoping that you will be the final answer to what they want to hear. And so based on that answer, then I'll be able to tell them, then you can now go to this hospital or that hospital. So assuming now we have reached NHIF, it's not civil servant. The next thing I'm thinking as a doctor is, where will they get responsive service? Because at the end of the day, they will tell me they're stuck. They'll come back. Yeah. And for me, the other question I'll ask myself, do I know somebody there who will be able to support them as they walk the journey. I hope I've answered the question.
You have, because you have started the conversation on, obviously, then it tells you that we are tiered. We don't access healthcare at the same level, and we expect that. So the next question then is, are we being fair in the way we charge for services that you offer? Or are we kind of leaving out, or it's like crowding out everyone else?
I would say the answer is yes from where I sit. And I'll go back to what Dr. Osoro has said. It is not a one size shoe fits all.
Yep.
If you go to APA, you take a cover. Different schemes have got different benefits, different remits. So that largely will dictate where you go. The healthcare space has quite expanded in the recent past, almost to a level of explosion. And you will find, pricing as low as $10 for a comprehensive service for a patient. Could be drugs, consultation, basic labs. You will find consultation all the way up to $150. Yeah. Depends on what you're seeking for, because we have nurse-led clinics. So considering that the industry is quite open in terms of accessibility, where you want to access care, the brand that you want to visit, I think that there is fairness, because say we are seated with John here, our outpatient facilities are being run by a medical officer before we refer you to a specialist. But the pricing is different. I'll be insured by resolution, and I can choose to go to Meridian, or I can choose to go to MPSHA. And the other thing is also from a regulatory perspective, if the people who used to follow their insurance products a long time ago, there's something called roaming. We used to work to use in telecoms. Yeah? And those days, the insurance company could lock you to a specific provider. But the regulator came in and said, no, you can't lock patients to a specific provider. People have got a choice. So not only from a market perspective, there is also a regulatory aspect to it that, for me, ensures that there is fairness, there is competitiveness. But there is something that maybe I will elaborate further. There is something called adverse selection, and we'll unpack it, and we'll see the drivers for that.
Okay, if you're taking notes, we will want to hear advanced selection and what that entails. Mr. Kwame, before I come to Mr. Shah, you've had the two of them, and I'm thinking, what's going through your mind now? Yeah, because as a consumer, there's still, from what the two have said, there's a whole large pocket of individuals that will be left out of that. So what's your view on that?
All right. I think they're right in the sense that health demands must meet. Health demands must meet supply, and it's also a but in some ways, in comparative terms, it's a service that requires paying for, and there are some fixed costs and the other costs that vary, as they've stated. So if you talk about it, so speaking as a consumer, I'll speak in two ways. I'll speak first about the fact that if you're working in Kenya, one of the first things that's mandatory is for you to pay to the public health insurance scheme, right? Now we can talk about whether that amount is adequate or not, but basically it's a mandatory part of the requirement. So I sit in an office with 23 other colleagues, and at the end of every month, it's my responsibility as a chief executive, together with the administration team, to make sure that those deductions have been made and surrendered to the NHIF. And what I'm telling my colleagues is this is necessary for you, not only because government would send you to jail, but because it helps you to get coverage. The feedback they give me is interesting. So what's the other option? The other option is to use private health service. Private insurance service. And as Dr. Lukwara has mentioned, there are options as well there. It's not as wide as everybody would seek, but it's there. And they tend to give you a broken down service. You can choose. There's some things that are fixed and there's certain things that you can choose. And here too, there's a mixed picture. Some people are generally very happy, others are not. But I'll give, and as I end, I'll end with one thing that concerned me because it started in the last month. So every year, because it's you buy the insurance cover for a year, for instance, because I'm talking about the private side, you buy it for a year, and towards the end of the month, incidentally, for the Institute of Economic Affairs, our cover starts on the 1st of June every year. So right now, basically what we're doing is having discourse with them. But one of the most interesting things about Kenya's, or rather, the particular one that we have, is we actually have to hire an auditor to go through the claims that our insurance company makes regarding the treatment that was given to us. Because your past year's performance is what determines what the next year's premium is. So definitely that's an incentive for us to use efficiently the cover that we have so that it does not ratchet upwards our performance. And believe me or not, they have very sophisticated systems. But we found our rota, or rather the feedback that was given to us, they don't tell us who, but they tell you basically this treatment and this treatment. And some of them are so odd that I asked my colleagues, who was in hospital on this day and that day? And the person who was supposed to be in hospital, whose number is reflected, had traveled out of the country.
You know, as APA, I sit at the group level of Apollo Investments, and we've got several companies. And APA Insurance is one of the largest insurers for health in Kenya. We believe that as APA, we would like to make sure that the people we insure are properly taken care of. Doesn't always happen, but generally, I would say 99%, we do that. We make sure that we give them the service that we have promised, and sometimes above more than that. Now, the question about the regulator, that's a very difficult one to answer, because what it is that we would like the regulators to always, in fact, we've got two regulators that we are looking at here. One is on this side is we're looking at the Insurance Regulatory Authority, which regulates the insurance sector. And on the other side, we also have the Ministry of Health, which regulates the providers in many different ways, but not to the same extent that the insurance regulator does. Now, it's very difficult for me to answer why the regulator did not take the action that was intended for resolution earlier, or announced the closure at an earlier time. But you know, it's very similar to what's happening in the banking sector, because you suddenly find that the central bank closes a bank on a particular day, and you've been you're a depositor, not a borrower, you're a depositor, and you're left high and dry. So similarly, the same thing has happened in the case of resolution, is that the regulator had to take an action, and they took it. But as you said, as Kwame said earlier, is that a lot of people knew that there was something wrong with resolution. All the hospitals knew. All the hospitals knew. So the thing is that the red flags were out there, and why the medical fraternity did not take it up as well, or they could have gone up. There are sort of the insurance regulatory authorities there, the Insurance Association of Kenya Insurance is there, and also the other one that we should also involve is the Association of Insurance Brokers, because it's a broker and agent that takes you to a particular insurance company. So they should have been there. What has happened with the resolution is unfortunate. We do not like to see competitors go down the way resolution went down. Because when they go down, we also get a bad name. And people talk. Basically, insurance is something people need to have, but they do not like to have it because they say that it's very expensive, and on the other hand, that insurance never always does not deliver. That's the other problem that we have. There's a mistrust against insurance companies. So for us, when a company has gone down, it gives us a bad name as well.
Okay.
So we do suffer similarly to other companies as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's like the domino effect. So Moses, first of all, very briefly, I will want you to tell people the kind of innovation that you're doing in your company and how it ties into this. That's very brief. And then I'll ask you, are we doing right by the consumer? Because I'm questioning even the way we submit our premiums. The fact that we have to submit annual premiums for most of us, while in other markets they are very accommodating. You can even submit depending on how you receive your revenue or your salary. You can structure it such that you are always ahead, 1 month ahead, but you don't have to pay an annual premium. I want to ask why we haven't innovated as much compared to other countries. After you tell us what it is that you're doing, which is very exciting. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Irene, for inviting me, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So at MTIBA, so what we do is we have created a health payments platform that connects healthcare providers, payers, and consumers, and creates an ecosystem of trust between the interactions. Why is this important? You've heard Kwame talking about insurers and hospitals. Everyone is dribbling, so there is a total mistrust that what you get is actually not what you thought you were buying is not what you get when you go to the point of service. When you go to the hospitals, they'll talk about we have services and we don't get paid, and whether it is NHIF or private insurer, there's a certain lens. And Ashok has just talked about also the mistrust that the public have. And all these three parties, it's important and key that they have trust and transparency, because when that is not there, then what happens is the interests are completely misaligned. And that then results into costs going up. And when costs go up, the insurers have the lever of driving premiums up. The hospitals have the lever of driving costs up. But the consumers have no lever, because then they will be left, the ones who can't afford now, only the big corporates will be left paying. But now those SMEs and the individuals get dropped off. And so what we are doing in terms of innovation is by digitizing and creating this platform that enhances the trust, will lower the overall cost of care and empower users and empower the individuals and the insurers and the hospitals. And as a result, then by bringing the trust, drive insurance coverage. You've asked me about why it's difficult to have monthly covers and payments. And to be honest, it's shocking that we don't. And the reason is simple. If you look at maybe insurance, one of the challenges that we've had in the sector is products are very complex for various reasons in terms of risks, management, and so on. And to administer this complexity is what has held back most of the innovation that you see or the lack of the innovation in the insurance space, because then you need to digitally transform your operations. And the reason why I say it's shocking is because in this country, we've seen how M-Pesa transformed banking, including mobile lending and so on, and the innovations around it, and how transactions, it's possible to break down transactions and activity. And so from where I sit, all the rails are there in terms of the building blocks, whether it's payment, connecting the health transactions with the health payment engines. All users, everyone in this room has a mobile phone, and probably do a lot of their transactions on mobile. So people have a place where they can see what they are entitled and so on. And so it is indeed possible, but also there is a regulatory component in this country where there was a drive, and I think there still is a drive to have annual covers because of you're not sure if people will then pay the 1 month and then they consume and drop off. But I do think with the technology that is in place today, with the trust and the creativity, because the products are there, the creativity, we should be able to innovate and have this much more.
Okay. Thank you, Moses. And so back to you, Kwame. It's now that we have laid out what the problem is, that you have covered, but you're not quite covered in this market. At least you don't sleep comfortably thinking that what you thought you covered for is actually what you would.
The regulator must bear the blame. Let me tell you why. So just to make sure that I knew what I was doing when I came here, I went through the IRA's website to look at the reports that they give. And they give reports about claims ratios and everything else. When you look at that report, it's fairly data comprehensive. But it is intended for somebody who would like to invest, or somebody who wants to understand how much float the insurance company bears. So basically, it's intended for an insurance peer, not for a consumer of those services. So that it allows you to actually assess for your firm, so how often do they pay their claims, what kind of complaints do they have, and that kind of stuff. So basically, that's just a financial analyst's report, in my view. And I've been one, so I think I can say that without. So if they have not mandated reporting to actually show that they're troubleshooting and what kind of claims do you have from your clients, then obviously it's the rumors that we have that inform us about what the problem might be. And my view is, a regulator is one of the people, or rather, a regulator has power because they can structure incentives in such a way that market players, and we can't do without them, market players then respond in the right way. So that's one. I will not blame the consumer who's looking for the cheapest or what looks like the most cost effective, because cash is difficult to come. So you're not going to blame the consumer if they say, look, if you give us, just like most corporations and many places, you do your three farm call, right? But you decide by choosing the technical report, then you go for the financial one, and then after that you eliminate. So at all times you're not just going to leap to the most expensive necessarily. So it's upon the consumer, it's upon the regulator then to actually provide or force disclosures that allow us to be more aware. It's called about buyer being aware. At least they need to give us the specific information that allows us to make those claims for ourselves. So it's not possible. The brokers get their commission early now, so they can leave the game. And sometimes brokers in this country, even without telling you, are actually agents, and that's okay. I mean, it's not blame. They're actually agents of all insurance companies. So what they do is, they're not covering you. What they're doing is probably going to direct you to the firm that gives them the highest commission. So with all these things being as they are, everybody faces incentives. And as a student of economics, I know that incentives are very powerful. They're not destiny, but they're extremely powerful. It is the insurance regulator then who needs to come back and say, what kind of disclosures do I give? And it should not be a standard one, because when you're buying health insurance, it's a completely different product from, say, buying a credit card or whatever else and all those other things. So I think I would place it especially that the regulator has not done well. And maybe this is a moment for the regulatory institution to ask themselves, given that this is quote-unquote water under the bridge, what would we have done better? And perhaps call this meeting and listen to us and say, if I am not a part of that sector, knew in 2020 that even if these guys gave us a proposal and it was the cheapest, we are not taking it because we were in a meeting in which a mother burst into tears for the fact that she had a card, she's in Eldoret, a child is in Nairobi, has fallen off a bike, and you go to hospital and you're told, you're not going to do any stitches until you send us. So she had to send it by M-Pesa. So empty and all these other things are completely needed. So that's basically it. So that kind of information that we hear in rumors and all those other questions, it's something that the regulator should be able to pick and make real sense of them about whether they're just rumors or whether it's a real good content. So the risk profiling of every institution in a way that allows the consumer to make the right decision is something that's been lacking. So if you ask me, I'll place it entirely in the hands of the regulator.
Okay.
I'll start by saying we are guided by various parameters when we cost our services. And so, for example, the cost of consultation in MediHeal or our hospital where you have medical officers will definitely be higher than in a level 2 hospital where it's a clinical officer or a nurse-led clinic. So there are those disparities based on the quality of care or perceived quality of care that we claim to offer to the patient. Number 2, again, depending on the level of the hospital, whether it's level 5, 6, level 2, 3, even the access of the consumables that we use will vary. One, because of the kind of patients we have. So for example, I'll tell you, we do have generic medication. And if you come with a flu, I don't mind giving you generics. But if you're in ICU, I won't risk. I will give you the best brand because I want you out of ICU. If you come with cancer, and we've had patients where we will give options. And yes, generics will be at 97%, the brand will be at 99%, and you speak and educate your patient. Those who can afford or will find means will say, I don't even want a 2% chance of this thing coming back. I can't imagine going through this again. So again, also the medication we give will vary depending on the complexity of disease. Why? Because we are judged by our patients, by our colleagues, by the system, based on the outcomes that we have. Someone will say, I went and I had a heart surgery and I came out, and they'll sing about it. Another will say, my relative went there for an appendectomy and died. No one ever asks what happened, how bad was it? The thing is, I've been given the answer, and that's a bad place. They can't handle an appendix. These ones can handle a heart. I'll go where they handle a heart. So those are some of the things that determine some of the costs that we see. Is it fair or unfair? For us, the rationale is to be open and transparent when we communicate the prices. And that's why I said, for example, we'll tell you there's a generic and there's branded, depending again on the case that the patient has. The other thing, are we fleecing our fellow insurers, our payers? I'll go back to what Moses Kuria said. We still need to improve our communication. We still view each other with suspicion, but we have come a long way. And it helps that we have doctors on board even in the insurance companies, because then you can go to the point of, let's talk clinical. This is what happened, this is what happened, these are the protocols. However, some of these conversations, I would say, should happen before the patient comes to us. Not when the patient has come, they are being discharged, and the question is, why did you charge this? And so when Kwame is at the end, and the doctor has discharged and everything is done, he's told, we are waiting for the insurer. So it creates mistrust, because the insurer has trusted me to be a good ambassador for our mutual patient. However, at the same time, I also have a role to play to ensure that my brand is not blamed for delay of the patient. So you will find then we create mistrust in that regard. Conversations can be had to prevent this, and I think those are things we've already begun with various insurance players so that we can avert this. Are there bills that are sometimes overcharged? Yes. That's one of the challenges we have sometimes with our health management information systems. There are also human errors sometimes. You find a new item that was brought in, maybe someone didn't understand what it meant, because the truth is, the people who do billing are not medical. They are finance, they are cashiers. And so for us, the thing we try and do is, when the patient is leaving in each department, just check that what has been billed is what you actually used. And if the patient picks anything that's off, we immediately credit it. We do not have any conversations of no, because it's very easy to tell. It's documented in the patient's notes. Everything that we used in theater is there. If this wasn't used, we remove it and we allow you to go home. I think Dr. Rukwaro will
Well, I think Dr. Osoro has basically nailed the ethical part of the providers. You see, for me, number one is I look at it this way: is we are in a fraction, and this fraction, the numerator and the denominator, is 1. Divide by 1. And the answer is 1. Because for a shock, the interest should be for his insured to get the best quality service. Yep. For me is for my patient, who is his client, to get quality care at an affordable price, at an ambient, clean environment. Yeah. And I am one of the proponents of we don't need to drive the cost of care. I'm one of the proponents that healthcare is not a margin business. Yeah, I would believe is, yes, you'll be shocked that probably over 70% of the healthcare providers in this country are actually for-profit organizations. So they are in it to provide a service, and it's a human service, but they're also in it to recover their investment. Having said that, is then just like the insurance companies that I deal with, I have tired them. There are those who are very honest in their dealings. Yeah. If there is a rejection, we know it will be a genuine rejection, or if they made a mistake, they will own up to it and they will pay. Of course, it comes with its own pains. Then there are those who are number 2, just difficult. There are number 3 who are rock, and there is number 4 who are NHIF. Okay. Having said that, is that the same case. Even for me, in the healthcare industry, and you know, in the industry that you in, if you believe that every prayer is honest, straight, and ethical, then you're living in a world I call utopia. You know, even in your own organization, there's a very big percentage, double digits percentage of your own employees who look for the opportunity not to do the right thing. Okay? It is what it is. But I know that majority of the healthcare providers are not in it to fleece the consumer or the insurance company. And, you know, Irene, when you get a bill, and I can speak, I have sought services in my other life at Pisha, Nairobi Hospital, at Aga Khan, and you get an itemized bill. Okay? And honestly, you would be able to say, do I have this medication? Did I go to the lab? You know, did I see a doctor? You know, some services actually we offer for free. Look, when you get into an outpatient facility, you see a receptionist. Yeah, we don't charge you. Go to a nurse who will actually pick out any issue with your vitals. We don't charge you, and we charge start charging from consultation. Okay. As she said, is genuine prayers will actually encourage patients to go through your bill. Yeah. If you find anything that is appearing twice, you know, there are conditions, and there are doctors in here who will tell you that, especially if you're admitted, you might need to run blood sugar test thrice in a day. Did we freeze you? It's a clinical, you know, decision. But there are those who will sit in a room, had write bills, because at the end of the day, and that this is where our friends on the other side also have to make a decision. You know, am I looking for them to empanel the guy who is telling me I'll charge you 300 for consultation, but that guy will sit at the back of the room, yeah, will manufacture a claim, and then you start hearing stories of fraud, whatever. In my life, I have let people go because, yeah, you came with her card because you are her daughter and you are above a certain age, and so some of us do not even tolerate those things. But having said that, how do I look at this? There are common aspects that drive health-seeking behavior, and that's why I will come back to adverse selection. Is number one, outside general outpatient consultation, the other services, I guarantee you, are driven by the physician. The physician will mostly guide you in the hospital that you'll go to, yeah? Without even, them they don't educate you that if you go to Nairobi John Hopkins Hospital, you'll pay a consultation of 6,000, but when you go to Mr. Okwaro Clinic, you will pay 200, okay? And once that happens, yeah, you as a patient, you lose actually control. The underwriter loses control, yeah, and then the blame game begins. Yeah, I will tell you, for surgical procedures, hospitals take home less revenue than the doctor for most of them. Yeah.
How many doctors are here? Can you attest to that?
Yeah.
They don't.
Not always.
No.
And I'll give you an example. Just a common surgical procedure, CS.
Yes.
Just go analyze a CS bill at Avenue Hospital, at Nairobi Hospital, at MP Shah Hospital. You will see what the surgeon took home and what the doctor took home. So there are many components that come in here. So you see, once now the doctor determines where you're seeking whatever, you will find you lose control, as I said. And I like giving a perfect example. A long time ago, I went to visit Nairobi Hospital once. Yeah? And it's not, I'm not talking now here as a competitor, as a consumer at that time. My medical cover was 30,000 per outpatient. By the time I was leaving that place, I had spent 70% of
the outpatient cover.
the outpatient cover. What did I learn from that is that actually, also my underwriter should have educated me on, evaluate, because honestly, this is a benefit. It's actually, you have got a wallet, you have got 30,000 bob. When you spend 2,000 bob, it's not coming back.
So what you get is, how many did they tell me the percentage of insurance uptake in Kenya? What's the percentage?
Very low.
No?
No.
But that's inclusive of NHIF.
Yeah, remove NHIF.
Without NHIF, it's about 3%.
Yeah, it's 3%.
It has been like that for 22 years.
Yeah.
No, but it's a 2.7%.
Okay, there you go.
It's a 2.7% penetration rate.
Yes.
Against the GDP.
Yes.
But the thing is I think we have to understand how insurance. First thing is, as insurers, we are trying to see if we can increase our penetration. So people like MTBA, Meridian, and so on are important. That they will help us to drive the numbers. But we are not able to get the numbers that we would like. But let's go about the if you look at the insurance companies, we are not angels. I agree. And we have a contract, and when we issue a policy, that is a contract. And the policy states exactly what we will cover you and what we will not cover you for. And normally we would, the hospital or the provider will know, we we give them an authorization and we tell them that when the limit reaches a certain amount, please get back to us, because the patient, the individual might not have might only have a limit. But let me tell you about this last 2 years. The last 2 years, to me, is that the hospitals lost their humanity. They became, what would I say, Shylocks. COVID was something none of us imagined. And when COVID happened, all the hospitals became empty. Nobody was going into the hospitals. And as APA, we took a decision. Our head of health is there. We took a decision that we will cover every patient for COVID, despite pandemics not being covered, cannot be covered. We said we will cover every patient who has got COVID because we didn't even know. Even NHIF went ahead. The minister, the CS said it. NHIF said it that we will not provide any COVID cover to any patients. But we as APA, we decided to do it. But then we started talking to hospitals, and we found that hospitals increase their charges by 3-fold or 4-fold. Normally in a week in ICU would cost you about $1 million shillings. Because of COVID, they increased it to 3 million. And basically, when there was, we could not even discuss with them. There's one particular hospital, we were very happy that, and the person, that one of the persons who used to be in their hospital is here. We made an arrangement with them, and they basically, we told our hospital, our COVID patients, please go into this particular hospital, and we have an arrangement. And at that same time, the same hospital also gave us home care. So when a patient was, when a COVID patient was released, they would follow up the patient and the family, to see, making sure that they were all right. But what we found was hospitals would charge you if there's in a COVID ward there are 10 patients, each patient would be charged 10,000 shillings just for PPE. If the 10 patients are there and 5 nurses are there for the day, how can you charge 10 patients 10,000 for PPE, which costs you 2,000 shillings? And the usage of gloves and so on, we have had horrendous stories. And it's basically, the thing is that we paid something like, is it 240 million in 2020 for COVID claims?
330.
So the thing is that what it is that the mistrust between hospitals and insurers is great, because what we find is that the hospitals, the problem we have is, you did mention it, is that what happens is our people deal, when it comes to payment of claims and so on, they deal with the finance guys. When we go to the finance guys and say, there's all this, these are the wrong things that you've done, you find that no, we must go to our medical team and ask them. And for COVID, we have seen people being charged 24 million shillings and enormous numbers. Their insurance cover is only 10 million or 5 million. So we go and pay the 5 million. Where is the person going to get the other 19 million?
Now, the crux of the matter, isn't it? As we proceed, it's opening up, and we now can see it's not as rosy as. My two doctors want to make a comment before I go to Kwame. Kwame, I'm coming to you because this has just opened up for me a whole can of worms.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, let me introduce myself. I think it's important that I introduce myself. My name is James Kamau. Professionally, I'm a certified public accountant. I'm an insurer. Mr. Shah, you knew me when my hair was black. worked with your friend and my father, the late Robert Gacheche, Intra-Africa Assurance. I'm also, my age, by the way, I also have another degree. I'm a doctor, but not a doctor of medicine. My doctorate is known as LBE, Learning by Experience. And why is that? I am, as you see me seated here, I am 30 years old. When I say 30, I'm a person positively living with HIV for the last 30 years. So it has forced me to be able to understand health and health issues, pharmaceutical issues, and everything. And I've had all of you talk. And I'm sorry, because some of us are in the midst of it. Now, let us start. I mean, yes, and like I told you, I'm a health economist and also an activist, but this time I'm just speaking. I'm not going to bring activism yet. Yet. There's absolutely no way, and I'm also, as I'm speaking, privileged to be on the NHIF reform team, that there's a trance between the private hospitals and NHIF. Okay? So I'll start from the word go. Madam, I'm not saying you've given. MP Shah, you take the charge sheet. A pair of Panadol is 150 bob. Hello? No, please, let's get this right. Other services are everywhere. Yet, all this, there's no private hospital that is not registered under non-profit. Hello? I want us to understand some of these things. My uncle, your friend, went to India. He stayed there for 9 months. He asked for the bill. He abused the whole hospital. He called them idiots. They told him to put, because when the bill came and everybody came, he could not understand this is the bill when he's been there for 9 months. Do you know what he did? He said, because I was prepared to pay well over 30 million, he asked, do you have any patients who have not been able to pay for the bill? Okay, that's a story for another day. The issue we are having right now, and this is now where I want you guys in the industry. And by the way, before we go anywhere, let's understand you are a profit-making organization. Now, NHIF has come. NHIF is saying, let us find out why. Like she rightly said, there are different charges and everything. All those charges of consultation have never been actualized. You know, this is something that just comes out. Because you'll find the same doctor who's working at Kenyatta National Hospital charges his consultation at 2,000. Across the road in Nairobi Hospital, hello, are we getting together? So the issue that is coming here is that we now need to neutralize and have anything, a minimum, bare minimum of what needs to be charged. If I want to pay more, that's up to me. I'll buy a bottle of beer here at 400 bob as opposed to 200. So I think this is something that we need to know. And I think I have not had any of you talk on how, from the healthcare provider, you are going to be able
translate to good business for me, or good service. There are still times, even when you have paid your premiums, you go to, I actually was a victim of that. I produced my resolution card for dental. I'm supposed to have outpatient covered some amount. And what they told me outright is, we don't take resolution health, you have to pay out of pocket. So all I'm hearing is, we do it right, we do it right. How does that translate to good service to the consumer? And what should we be expecting from the two sectors? And then your questions. How many have questions again? Okay, yeah, everybody has a question.
So I'm really glad that Ashok Shah has mentioned that yes, I think there are some dishonest people. Well, I'm glad that Ashok Shah has admitted that there's some dishonest people. I still think that if the regulator had the view that if any monkey business takes place in a hospital in a consistent way, then it suggests to me that it has the approval of the management. Something would be done, it would actually reduce those things. But let me now throw a spanning. You're completely right. He said that one of the things about healthcare in Kenya is too expensive. It is. Kenya has high costs for some reason. So if you look at it, and again, I read my numbers from the economic survey, and it tells you that the number of doctors trained in a year, right, is at a slower pace than the growth in the population. What that means is the doctor to population ratio in Kenya is getting worse. And what that means is, from a market perspective, doctors have no incentive by competition among themselves to reduce your cost. No wonder they work in Nairobi, they work for the public sector, right? And then they work on the other side in the private sector as well. And from both, they make a good living. There is nothing that would change that unless doctor numbers also change. So that's a public sector problem too. It is not possible to achieve universal healthcare, whichever way, and sometimes universal makes people the impression that it will be free. I think it would have to be an assortment of what are the basic packages that people should have. That's not possible with the doctor numbers we have. It isn't. Relative to the fact that we have a population that's growing very, very, in a comparatively fast way. In I think another 15 years, Kenya will have a population of 60 million. That's not a bad thing. But if at that time we still have 10 or 20,000 doctors, which means you have one doctor for 30,000 people, we'll be in trouble. Why? Because the demand for their time and their specialty will be so high that they'll simply go back there. So I'm not necessarily saying that you let everybody study medicine, but we cannot have the number of medical schools we have in Kenya and still believe that only 500 people or 1,000 at most per year should study medicine. We need to ask ourselves, is that really true? And I think there are enough brains in Kenya to make that part of the development of the UHC over time. Of course, doctors will not accept that, because they're supposed to be very smart people, right? And they're the smartest people in every room. So that's one of the things. But that's part of the reason. Because if you go to a general clinic, you're always told that you need a specialist. And they are. But you hear that for some kind of ailments, there are only 3 specialists in Nairobi. So they're in MP Shah in the morning, they're in Nairobi Hospital. So that suggests to you that this is a structural problem in the way the medical field has been done. So part of it is public sponsoring or public investment in the education of doctors, because that's an investment in our future health. If we don't change that, you'll still get people doing that. Now, if somebody charges me 150 shillings for Panadol, this is what I'll do. And I thank God, not because I'm a supremely healthy person. I've never had to spend a night in a hospital. And I hope it stays like that. But if somebody charges me, I will shame them. And maybe we should start a portal where all we say is, look, Kwame, under what circumstances would you justify charging for paracetamol at 150 shillings per tablet? Shame them. Shame them to actually have to either justify those numbers, because sunlight is a disinfectant. So part of this is because they can get away with it, I think. So if you decide nevertheless that I just want to go to a place where my paracetamol is 400 shillings, then that's fine. You say I'm not. But if you think it's a problem, I think you should shame them. So maybe one of the things Kenyans should do, just apart from catching politicians doing bad things, is maybe taking screenshots of those invoices and putting them online, and let's have debates about what they mean.
Okay, so
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, panelists. Great discussions here. I think this is something that we should keep up on a regular basis. I have 2 questions. One to you, Ashok, from an insurance perspective, and then the other to the 2 providers in the room. So the first question is, to what extent do insurance companies involve the providers when designing their products? Because I think that part of the problem here is that the providers do not quite understand what this insurance company is. So in terms of the benefits, the limits, the exclusions, how we've priced it, yeah, the targeted providers. So this is a product that is targeted towards these upper level providers, middle level. So you co-design a product. If we co-design a product, then we both take responsibility for it. And once we both take responsibility for it, it makes us want to make it work. So I think that is something that in my years, I have been in the healthcare provision space for the last 20 years, running healthcare groups for the last 12. I think that's something that is really key and is missing in the industry. And if we're able to get this right, then it's something that could change things quite a bit for everyone involved, all the parties. Again, to the providers in the house, there are different models of payment, and what we're used to is, so to speak, charging on a volume-based basis. So you charge your lab test based on the number of lab tests you've done, based on the number of days in hospital, based on the number of drugs you gave. So if we could get the health economists here to help us design value-based payment systems. So you're being paid on the basis of the value you're providing to the patient rather than the number of tests or days or drugs that you're giving to the patient. To what extent will we be willing to accept this? Thank you.
You know, I've been listening and I was trying to figure what should I say. And I decided to try and say things that are not said in extreme anger, but are basically analytical. So the first issue, you know, keeping away from the very annoying things that happen. I've witnessed people dying in the top hospitals that I will not name, were very close to me, out of sheer negligence, receiving bills where my son looked at the bill and he says those were 100 Panadols in a top hospital, one of the top hospitals in this country. So the first issue is just remember that. And since it's not going to be helpful if I tell you that. So all those things exist and I'm not telling you that. So I'm sorry, gentlemen and ladies, whatever you're saying, not because of you, I know it's not about you, it just does not reflect the reality of Kenya. That's what you've got to understand, and it's not your personal fault, but that's just the reality. Now, keeping away from that, you know, when you've gone through things personally, then you tend to become, you can't see the forest from the trees. So let me attempt to see the forest rather than get into that side of it. But you've got to understand that about people and why they might be impatient with even the logic you're giving. So I have a more general view about Kenyan society. I lived away for a very long time, as you might have probably figured. Just the way I've started, I'm not very Kenyan. So the first challenge in Kenya, while honestly won't work, is I came back to Kenya. I used to ask very direct questions. Then I realized we have a culture of telling lies to each other. So people never have honest, frank conversations. Kunapakana mafuta. You see? So even here, I don't feel I can have a blunt, direct conversation. That's why I've not named that hospital. You see, so I've also now become acculturated to that way of thinking. So when he says, let's set up a portal, I actually thought about it for consumer business. You know what someone told me? But I'm thinking, Risasi, if you're going to cross paths with, so back to where I'm getting at, Kwame, I used to be an economist, and I abandoned that and went and studied finance and became a finance guy. Now, there's a school of economics called institutional economists, where they go socio-economic. So this technocracy stuff, we're talking technocracy. And I'm a trained technocracy person, I'm a quantitative investment guy, so I've done the maths, computers, what, but it has nothing to do with that. Countries proceed where you have a level of societal trust. So it's not like I'm saying, unless the society is committed to solving the problem, we can talk about it in a technocratic way. But there's only so much we can do, unless the society actually says we want to solve these problems. Thank you. Sorry for taking so much time.
You're not going to take as long as And Ashok, you got the questions, and Dr. Okay.
Thank you very much and, for everyone who's spoken before me. I just have to add to this. My name is Dr. Kianjui, and for the last 5 years, I've been trying to see what can be done. Because healthcare has done me a bad deal. Since I lost my father, I've lost many people. Like he said, because of, I will not call it negligence, I call it medical errors. And there are many reasons why medical errors are there. And I've tried, I've moved on, I wanted to become a pediatrician, I wanted to become this, I've done health management, and thought maybe I should influence policy. Because that way, it will change things. But I've found that it's not easy. But in the last 5 years, I've come to this realization. The issue is not the people, perfect people, hardworking people. The issue is the business model. That's my realization. The business model that we have, we're making money, and the economists here, many of them, some have from you, is the business model dictates how business will run, because how people are making money dictates how they do it. Healthcare, doctors will be here. Our business model is that we make money when people are sick. So using this business model, we're making money when people are sick, whether it's revenue, whether it's surplus, whether it's profits. Is it in our interest? Does the business model led to itself for us keeping people healthy? No. I was impressed when my colleague here mentioned about, can we have a very value-based business model? I want to say this, if we don't adopt a value-based business model, we're going nowhere. And finally, I want to say that the regulators have let us down. And it's not one regulator, not IRA, especially the health sector. What have they done? Instead of the regulators become regulators, they've sat on one side and become service providers. Look at all our regulators in healthcare. They belong where? They belong under Ministry of Health. 52% or more of the providers are under Ministry of Health. Can they be able to justify, objectively, measure outcomes in those public sectors where they also belong? The answer is no. The private sector have to pay for their annual licenses. The public sector, they don't pay. They will come to your lab to check whether you are following standards. They won't go to the private sector, to the public sector. So with the regulator, when a referee in a league is also sponsoring half of the teams in the leagues, do you expect fair play? Yeah. Thank you.
Steve, why didn't you ask me also for the protocol? So that you hold me accountable to what I do. That's the way the rest of the world has gone, or rather the developed health systems. It's something that will be nice if we can transition to. It makes life even easier for us as healthcare providers. The second thing, co-designing. Again, another thing I have asked, can we co-design? Again, one of my colleagues from insurance, where I said, don't ask me to reduce the cost. Why can't we look at what really comes into this? And then I'll tell you if this is what I have, this is why I do what I do. And one of our insurance providers has actually taken this and is looking at it, and we're trying to see what we can work out together with them. I think more trust between us will make a difference, and when we talk more, we are willing. And it's a risk we each have to take, whether we like it or not. I give to Mr. Rukwaro.
I think I'll be very brief, and I'll address the first question that Dennis asked. Can we price this as a product? Yes, we can. I have done the costings of how you can cost various conditions, diagnosis, and I'll give you, for example, I do believe without complications. Yeah, you can manage a hypertensive patient who doesn't have complications, stable, good diet, requiring regular medication at less than $500 of 50,000 Kenya shillings per year. Okay? My colleagues in the insurance industry will tell you they pay more than that per month, right? I do believe, yes, we need to move away from a shop telling me, give me itemized billing for lab, whatever. And I'm happy to do that because I don't agree with him. And that one I strongly disagree. And as I said, you need to tire people and know there are ethical, genuine people in the industry who do right. Yeah? And we give you an itemized bill, and we give you a person when we are discharging you. Please go through your bill. And if there's anything, we pass a credit note or we give you a cash back, and we do not argue. Yeah. But as I said, I radar to that. Also, as consumers, let's accept our responsibility about our choice. Yeah? Because honestly, if you choose to go to a place that either you are not aware of what goes on, or you clearly know that it is expensive, because look at it. I am an accountant by profession. I need to make that disclaimer. The guys who are calling me a doctor, if you fall here, I'll be running away together with the rest. But I've been in the healthcare space for long. I have accepted the title doctor. So, for me is my price. I know it. Yeah. And there's a similar accountants who will be priced 50% of my price. Yeah. And when you call me to interview me as a CFO, I will not accept that price because, and those dynamics will always be there. It's, guys, let's accept it. It's an open market. Secondly, for me is, and this is what I would encourage our colleagues in the healthcare industry, because whether you're an underwriter, whether you're a provider, we are in the healthcare industry, okay? Let's corroborate. We belong even to the same lobby groups, Kenya Healthcare Federation. But when you get there, we need to sit on the table and address what are the issues and fix them.
Okay, Mr. Shaw, and then,
I think there's something that Kenyans are very, Kenyans are basically people who accept things as they happen. They will not go out and talk about it. I've come across so many cases, and people ring me up because what happens is that they think that because of an insurance connection and I know a lot more about hospitals, they would call me and say, we've got a problem with this particular hospital, that there's negligence and so on, what do we do? So I tell them that, look, the only thing you can do is that perhaps take it up with the hospital and with the lawyer. But, when one of us has gone into a hospital and there has been negligence and the person has died, we accept it. We will not take it up further. It's very rarely that we do. So that's something about Kenyans. We accept fate, and it's something that happens. But just John, Apollo, back in 2000, we were the only company that started insuring HIV, and we did that for 7 years. We were the only ones. After that, others came in. But we said we took a bold step and we said this is something that we need to do.
After I went to court.
Sorry.
After I went to court.
No, you never went to court because you never went to court. I was the we basically said that under our medical cover we will provide. We provided HIV cover right from day one, and in our own staff we still have people who were HIV then, and like you, they're as healthy as me and you. So basically that's something that we believe that there are certain things that we must do as insurers. But Dennis, you're talking about, we don't really talk to a provider and tell them that, this, when we craft our covers, they are more based on what we have been doing it for a long time. And we keep on changing them from time to time. But I don't think we actually come to you and say, well, we do. We do for certain things. We come to you and say, can we have a package? Can we have certain packages? And then when we agree on those packages, we'll put it into our system and agree on that. But when it comes to our overall policy, we don't consult, and perhaps we should sit down with you and say what can be done. So that what will happen is that it will meet with the needs, and obviously you know more about the types of illnesses that take place, people are succumbing to, and we can then see whether we can cover those and agree the methodology of cover. The only thing, the other is value-based care. That's where value-based care will come in the sense that we would be able to go to a client. But in our case, Irene, what we do is we have got several types of covers. We have covers which, standard covers which will take care of everybody. We have corporate covers which are designed to what the corporate wants. But we also have a very minor cover for people at the bottom of the pyramid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moses, as you comment on what they've said, I'm hearing what people do right, but what we have established is that it's not where it should be, service to the consumer. Can we start pointing out, if we were to start addressing the disconnect, where could we start? What are the low-hanging fruits that could start making this a better relationship than it is right now? And Kwame, I'll ask you the same thing. And who else has a question? Carol? Oh gosh, okay.
Thanks.
So let's all of us try and keep it brief.
So let me first start by throwing my 2 cents on the provider payment mechanisms, because I think this is really fundamental. We are very much on a fee-for-service model in this market that completely misaligns the interest continuously. So I think going to either value-based care or other models and the data and technologies there to enable that would help. Now, if I look at things from a consumer lens, we are seated here talking about choices. But in healthcare, there is the highest information asymmetry for the patient. When the patient is walking in there, they only have a rough idea that I have a cover, let's say I have a cover from APA of 100,000 outpatient, but I don't know the exclusions, the sublimits, everything. I'm just being surprised at the point of service. I don't know the prices. And so when we are talking about, yes, I walked into this hospital because I believe it gives me the possible, the best possible outcomes. And the first thing we need to do, and I think we talked about it, is really that member education. And today, the insurers and the hospitals, they do have the cost, they do have the prices. I think you suggested an idea, but if you take at it from an aggregated level, if you look at what happened in the hospitality industry, and even today you will know what is the cost of the hotel that you want to go to, and you will go in and you will check and so on. Same thing with the airline industry. People share information, even if it's some of the operational, it ends up improving the customer experience. So if we are to empower the users, we must be able to take those bold steps. There is no reason why today we are not able to actually, for example, if I throwing this challenge to the underwriters and the hospitals, there's no reason why you're not able to share some of the information around outcomes, if also around enabling, maybe not specific prices, but the range, so that if I am as an empowered consumer, I know if I only have 20,000, then there are some hospitals, if I go to, it will cost 50% of that benefit, and then probably I should go to another one. I think that is, and that has to start. I also do think from a regulatory perspective, I think the regulators on both particularly from a healthcare industry or from the insurance industry, I do think that it's time to actually bear more teeth, because as I've had the red flags and things, and yet we all know, I think according to some industry reports, we talk about reports that have even come out of the industry, 35% fraud, same reports that come through from the underwriting side, the health side. So, and these kinds of things about consumer protection. So I do think it's also a challenge to the regulators to be more proactive, more aggressive. You will not hear some of these things happening in the banking sector for long. So that would be my 2 cents. And the last thing, fundamentally, we have to empower the users. So we have to be able to engage with them where they are. And that's something the banking industry has done in the financial services. And you see users are much more empowered.
All right, Kwame.
So 2 things. I mean, Moses is right about this is a sector in which the greatest asymmetry between the professional and whoever is receiving the care, but also with the agents. So working in an office where we've had 20 years of, 20 I think, years of health insurance, but we don't know how much our agent gets as a commission for the money we pay. And they say that will not be disclosed, which I find very, very interesting, because then we don't know when they give us the usage rates, whether they're including the agent's part as part of the fees and everything else. So basically, the transparency that Mr. Kuria talks about here is also fundamental. And that's not something that, honestly, we should have to debate. It's okay, we know everybody needs to make a living, they're adding value, but you hear that in the industry, in some places it comes from 15% to as high as 30%. Then you need to ask yourselves, if you're only coming to us in June, because that's when we pay, why should our cost be loaded with 30% when we actually never see you at all? So those are some of the things, because that's a part of adding the value. All those cost measures need to make a difference. I mean, need to be material. And the second one that I also think is here again is, look, every hospital collects data. The health management systems that they have are very sophisticated. I think, as you said, disclosures about outcomes. And it's something that perhaps they will not do voluntarily, so it's something that the hospitals, the insurers and the regulator will push by saying, look, compared to the rest of your payments, how many of the people who were actually treated here last year had a tooth extraction as opposed to a cover, as opposed to a root canal, for those who are paying and those who are using the insurance product, because that will help you to understand where the incentives actually lie. That kind of information is not available, and the exploitation of asymmetry in an unfair way that actually loads the product with more makes the product more expensive than it is important. So yes, it's time for this sector to begin to work for its customers.
Okay, so we have
Is it ethical for insurance companies to reduce the limit of a patient the following year after they've been diagnosed with a serious illness?
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yes, it is. One more here. Okay.
Why be so discriminating in empaneling more providers? Because sometimes you want to offer a service as a provider, but the insurance tells you no, we have other providers. And even when you check the cost of those other providers, they're probably even more expensive than you. So they make it inconvenient for the patient, they make it more expensive for the patient because they also limit the people that they are also putting on the cover. And then in terms of doing business with insurances, as doctors we suffer because, and even the facilities, we have late payments from the insurances, yet the clients have already paid their premiums and you as a provider has already offered the service. And then sometimes, they negotiate. I think what he was suggesting is important about everyone being involved in costing the care, because insurances want a certain price, but don't take into consideration the cost of doing business with the provider. There's licenses, business permits, the medical boards, litigation and indemnity.
You got that?
I want to just point out a blind spot, I think, here, which is mental health. I think COVID did that quite well for us, but I think we can all agree that's where providers, insurers, and consumers are all failing, globally, but in this country as well. And I want to know from anyone on the panel, but provider insurers, what are you going to do about this in the next 5 years?
Good evening, my name is Caroline Chuguna and I'm an insurance agent. So to clarify, insurance commission is regulated. So whether I take you to APA or Jubilee or UAP, the commission is regulated and it's 10% for medical. So my question is to the insurance company and to the hospital, where as a client and as a patient, we are a common consumer for both of you. Where do you protect us as a client, or how can you come up with a mechanism to communicate to each other without affecting the client, who is a common consumer for both of you? In terms of if a client walks into a hospital and you're told, no, we are not taking resolution, at what point was that communication done? Can there be a timeline or a credit line between the hospital and the insurance? And also a timeline like 3 months already the communication is out to clients and to everybody to avoid that disappointment for the clients.
Why is it that when one is paying cash, it's cheaper when paying cash than when using an insurance card?
Good evening, my name is Dr. Elijah Tulip. I work in the insurance sector. I want to tell you, if you ever found yourself in a place where you're feeling bad about your insurance company or about a healthcare provider, it is not your fault. There are people charged with that. They're called regulators, and they are not doing everything they're supposed to do. If they're not doing everything they're supposed to do, there are people who they're accountable to someone. That someone is the one failing us, and it's not healthcare or alone. It's not insurance only. It's across all sectors: telecommunications, transport. There's a huge societal issue where we've accepted, we have a learned helplessness. So when you talk about value-based, this is another point. The problem I face when I see our claims is that there's so much low-value care, and very the high-level care or the high-value care is not as required. Every person comes there, it's a matter of how much you can afford to pay. Yeah, it's not a question of how much care do you actually need. So we'll tell you, no, 500,000 in ICU, that's your limit, that's it. But the same 500,000 can be used for multiple visits, going for health checkups, costing you 70,000 for things that are not necessary. And for as long as we continue misusing the little resources that we have, we will never reach that point where everyone gets what they need. And healthcare is a need, it's not a want. There are the extras out there that if we don't address that, then we will still continue throwing the blame game between insurers, providers, and patients. And patients are they're not consumers. Yeah, when you go to buy a phone, everything is okay with you. When you're going to a hospital, you're sick, for heaven's sake, someone needs to be watching out for our patients and make sure that they do get, so that no one takes advantage, be it the insurer, be it the provider, or anyone else along that chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And those are the last questions. I'll pick up the mental health rule. You're right, COVID made it clear that mental health is greatly underserved in this country, despite the fact that it's part of our priorities in universal health care. What are we going to do about it? One, a lot of public health information. Just from a cultural perspective, even when you tell someone to go and see a counselor, they ask you, do you think I'm mad? They will tell you, by faith, I will overcome this. So a lot of public health education, which we partner even with our peers, partner with institutions,
for us as an institution, just looking at ensuring that counseling services, whenever they are required by a patient, that initially we do not charge you for it, so that you have the first connection. And I'll tell you, 50% of the patients say they don't want to see a counselor or a psychologist. The patient has a right to choose who to see. And so, as a society, our role is first a lot of mental health awareness before it can even be accepted for people to truly pay. And then the reality that we have very few centers that offer good mental health. We all just think of one place called Madare, or we think of a rehab place. We've not seen mental health as a flu or a malaria, or I'm going through post-grieving depression. It will pass. It happens. So those are the things I think we can be able to do. Thank you.
I think somebody raised the issue about consumer protection, and I think that one I will not overemphasize it, because I think it's Kwame has talked about it for the longest time in the evening. You know, there's as much as we can do to protect you as a consumer from exploitation, and from where I sit, and let me give an example. That relates to insurance, but not the one who was blamed, but you have to pay the excess, and yeah, if we get it from the other party, we'll refund you back. So, and the car was repaired, and I went away, and I forgot about it, and I had another accident, the same case happened, and I had to pay and protect. 1 year down the line, APA called me to come and pick my excess refund check. That tells me that is an ethical organization that is taking its own initiatives to protect its consumer. And there are people in healthcare industry who are doing that, yeah, who are providing, and I agree 100%, the information asymmetry is just too huge. But they are, you know, there are those who are making everything possible to make the provision of service as transparent as possible. Are we where we should be? Not yet. The other question that was asked was about why cash is cheaper than insurance. You know, you have to look at it this way, and you know, for me, this is not even a regulation issue, because the regulator says insurance is a cash and carry business, yeah? And the people who have tried to do it the other way have left us as providers, as consumers, suffering. This is the second time as a provider I am losing money after resolution collapsed. Okay. Somebody mentioned the sprinkle, yeah. Okay. And so you, I mean, I provide services to you now, okay? My drugs suppliers require their payment now. My doctor will not understand that a shock has not paid me within 60 days, you know? And there's always of incentivizing, and I was telling you, it's not only cash consumers actually who are more get affordable pricing. Yeah? There are insurance companies that we work with, and when they pay us on like early payments within 3 days or so after, you know, we give it we give a cashback. Yeah. So, but of course, you don't expect that you pay me after 90, 120 days, and I do not underwrite my risk. And I said we just need to be clearly also honest, yeah, and be open. And it's just like even the question of UHC, just to digress a minute. Guys, let's go back and look at it. We are trying to deliver an affordable healthcare model, yet, yeah, what percentage of our drugs do we import? Show me one single manufacturer of lab reagents in this country. One. Yeah? Show me one manufacturer of radiological consumables. We have not even gone to an equipment. What is the cost of an MRI machine? I will tell you, she has invested in an MRI machine. I wouldn't invest in it. It won't give me a return in my own lifetime, mate. Yeah. And I'm not even half a century years old. Okay, so I mean, we need to look at those issues. There are solutions, I do believe, and we need to look about that. The last question was about communication of suspension of services. And you know, as I said, standard business practice. I will not come to Kwame having been insured by a shock and tell Kwame I'm going to suspend APA tomorrow, right? I do believe that the ethical thing to do, the best business practice, is communicate to a shock and tell him a shock there is a problem, and in 30 days, yeah. Because I believe you, we don't wake up and suspend services. We also have contracts with them on your side, and we'll communicate and tell them within this period we'll stop issuing services. Now, if he does not take any action after I have informed him and reminded him, come Friday, as Odudo was saying that accountants like suspending accounts on Friday, we'll just suspend the account, and the person who is in the ward when they are discharged on Saturday, you will pay cash. But we communicated. So it is upon it's incumbent also upon the underwriter, where possible, to communicate to their patients if they have decided that they do not want to work with a certain provider, and we are okay with that. Yeah.
Ashok.
Thank you. The first question you had was reduce the limit after they have been diagnosed. There are certain conditions in the policies that we have. Now, the main issue is when it comes to chronic. And that's the most, the biggest area of concern that we have. So what happens is that if somebody has been, say, in fact it happened to a friend of mine recently, he was insured with APA, and he's still insured with APA. And what happened was, he was diagnosed with a tumor. So when he went to the team, they said that the cover is up to, your cover is limited to 500,000 shillings. Because cancer, tumor is cancer, and to us it's a chronic condition. So we basically told the person that we can only cover you for 500,000 shillings. So I went to the team and I asked her, I said, can you explain to me this thing? And they said, well, this is a standard condition that we have. But what happens is that there is another policy we have. What would happen is that for the time you're diagnosed, we'll pay you, for that year we'll pay you the full cost. But the next year it will be reduced to a chronic condition, and we will limit that payment for any more incidences for that condition. So that is one area. Now, late payment to providers, I think, is something that we are quite clear about it. If we would not be, I think with somebody like Rukwara at Meridian, we have arrangements and we would negotiate rates. We'll negotiate rates with him, and in that negotiations we'd also say within what time we'll pay the bills that have been incurred. Cash versus, cash being charged by hospitals at a lower rate and insurance at a higher rate is a concern that we have raised many a times with the providers. We think it's wrong because if somebody is paying cash, they get a cheaper rate, and then somebody is under insurance, they have to pay higher, which we believe is not a good practice. So what we have done is all the providers that charge us more and charge the cash-paying patient less, we impose a co-payment. So suppose you go to a hospital which is charging people at a lesser rate for cash, and they charge us more, then we just say to the person, you pay the difference. So there's a co-payment. So a lot of these hospitals, we would say that we will charge, you'll have to pay 2,000 shillings from your own pocket, and we'll take the balance. That's how we handle it. But that's not the right way. It should be that a hospital also should charge perhaps the same rate for everyone. And so if they charge the same rate, then for us it's a good thing. Mental health. The reason mental health is a difficult cover that we can provide is that it can, it's like chronic. It can continue, and it's very difficult to know how to go. And the number of visits are quite a few. But because of COVID, what we did was for certain people, we actually said we'll provide counseling services. We'll provide counseling services because what happened was with COVID, what was happening was people were working from home. Then this loneliness and other things started coming in. So we said that we will make counseling services available to them. But that is only for the period of COVID, but not generally.
Thank you. Moses and Kwame, as we wrap up, you've heard what the questions were. I'm now looking for, perhaps from the two of you, 5 recommendations that would improve on the relationship that we've had. Clearly, there's work to be done. So as you answer the questions, I'm looking for from the two of you, 5 recommendations that we will take out of here and say, these are low-hanging fruits that we could start to address from now, and let's see that the next time we come here, we'll have some good news to report. Thanks.
Thanks, Irene. I think I'll just do 2, then leave 3 to Kwame. I think, it's interesting to hear this conversation around some of the underlying drivers on the mistrust. Especially, let me talk about the long payment cycles that we've talked about, and which then result to the differences between cash and prices for insurance, which then means that if insurance costs are up, then there will be more claims costs. Then what will happen is then you have a loading coming the subsequent year, and the cycle continues. I do think with automation and digitization, there is no reason why data is not flowing real time. Banks do clearing within 24 hours in this country, and that happens. So there is no reason why we shouldn't have the data flowing from hospitals and the adjudication, and then all the payment terms that have been agreed between the hospitals and the underwriters are all set up and automated with business rules, and that then means that the risk, the payment risk that the hospitals take, they don't have to take that, and therefore they don't have to factor that in the cost and so on. And that would go a long way in creating the trust. The second thing is, I believe we must fundamentally grow the coverage of insurance, whether it's working with on the private side or even on the public side. Let me put it this way. One of the fundamental reasons why the health, particularly private health insurance, we're talking about the investments that Dr. Ruparo here said that not invest in an MRI machine because it's costly. But you're looking at 3 million people who on the private insurance side were covered. The majority pay out of pocket, and that creates a big challenge. So we have to grow that risk pool, because then it means the investments on the hospital side can be done because there is a certainty on a constant stream of income that will come through. But fundamentally, it will save the financial shocks that lead to many families and many people straining. If I ask here how many people have been asked to contribute to a Harambe or one of those, very many hands might go up. So we must as industry players, we must think of how we will get people from post-payment, from out-of-pocket post-payments to prepayments through insurance mechanisms. And I think all that will help in driving the issues of cost. And to save Kwame, let me throw one more. We must be proactive about empowering the consumers. In this digital age, we've seen price discovery and empowering, giving people all the information they need to make decisions, transforming industries and creating trust and leading to the retention of customers and so on. So that is something that both as hospitals and as underwriters and as players in this industry, we need to do and we must do.
Correct. So I'm glad I learned something that actually the rates are regulated. That's what we thought as well. But we asked our agent who said that she's not allowed to disclose that for us with us. So maybe that's just a question of destroying trust once again. But the second point, the point that I'll add to you is Kenya's health system is more or less like one. So the kind of burdens that the private sector insurance firms will bear if the NHIF continues and public health infrastructure continues to fail will just get worse and worse. I mean, will get worse over time. So I think one of the things we have to conclude is, look, in as much as we also apply pressure because we pay, we must also ask the NHIF and the public health system to do better. So that's it has to improve, to be honest. It must have standards. That's one. Two, I'm opposed to the idea, of course, members of parliament have tried to fix it, where health insurance firms actually force you to have to use the NHIF fast cards, especially for outpatient, for inpatient stuff, then take up the reverse. I think that's kind of being very clever, to be honest, especially because most of them are the ones who benefit the most, because Kenyans go out there to private hospitals and then most of that income goes back there. So our fairness around how private firms and private hospitals will not push their costs all the way to the NHIF and then remain with the cream where they actually take bigger margins is one that's a useful one. But the final point is part of the security and the stability that we wish, to the extent that is possible, will come from what the regulators do. And it's bad to kick somebody when they are absent from the room or they are away. To be honest, the regulators in Kenya, both from the Ministry of Health side and the other, have done so poorly. So when Rukwaro says, and it's been fair, that he has 4 types of clients and NHIF is at the bottom, right? That's something that a Minister for Health should actually take very, very seriously. Because the last time I checked the data, Kenya's health expenditure is almost 50-50 with health, with private insurers, and the other amount of money comes from the public sector itself. So if one arm that is that big, mandatory, we pay through taxes and we pay through NHIF is doing that poorly, then it's telling us that the entire system could crumble on account of public sector performance. So yes, I think there's something to tell to private sector, but the public sector performance has to improve immensely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our panelists. Show of hands, who got something important from this? Yeah?
It's a clarification that is not right.
And
as an activist, I cannot go without...
You cannot let it go.
Some things have got to be put into perspective.
Will it take more than a minute?
No, just 1.5.
No?
I just want to clarify. The NHIF has started being reformed. I'm an activist. When you hear why I sit where I was advantaged to be put there, where there's been a trance between the private sector and the public, is because the private has seen the danger of losing the business, the small business that they have been having. Just to clarify so that you understand, in 2020, NHIF collected 53 billion, 70% of which went to private sector, who insure less than, what percentage did you say?
2.3.
Hello, are we getting where we are coming from? So I think the issue of the equitable, like what Kwame has said, why is Kenya the largest exporters of health to India when we have the private hospitals? And why has India decided, let us come here and build hospitals, they are now your competitors, because they're saying, if we charged half of what those guys charge there, we'd still make profits. I mean, that is something that we actually need to look at as we're moving. Thank you.
What I'm getting from this is that we cannot exhaust this topic tonight. So, show of hands, who would come in for a second round? It's everyone. Thank you. Yeah. Our panelists have decided they'll stay a little bit so that we continue this conversation. There are still some snacks and some bitings there, so we'll get to do more. But to Mr. Kwame, Mr. Korea, Mr. Ashoksha, Mr. Rukwaro, and my friend, Dr. Soro. I cannot thank you enough for making the time and for being honest, because now we more or less are starting to see where the problems are, and then the next question is how do we all fix it? The first thing that came out very strongly is that the regulator at whatever level has failed both you and both as the consumer, right? So that is something we have to look at. I'll take clips of this and I'll share so that it gets to the regulator and to some of the people that, the powers that be, because that's how we get the word out there. But for now, let's give our panelists a very big hand. And to Tranzact for making this evening possible. We are very thankful and we look forward to even more partnerships with attribute in the space. And to you, the attendees and Business Forum members, I'm really grateful that you made the time and you've stayed this long. We have actually crossed the time by 15 minutes. I'm glad that you stayed. And so until the next time, my name is Irene Gadiaka. Make sure you're on my mailing list for Nairobi Business Forum. If you're not there, make sure that before you leave, I have your name and email address. Stick around, network some more. Make sure that you get the answers that you want from the panelists. Thank you and have a good night and safe drive home. Yeah? Thank you.